everybody, thanks for tuning in. I'm in the Hammock Hotel, and I have my very first guest in the Hammock Hotel. The one, the only, RPelton 1.
Hello, friends. If you do notice, I am rocking the official Midwest Backpacker merch.
Very stylish, nice.
Is it available for sale yet?
No, it's very exclusive. Kind of like my YouTube channel subscribers. It's very exclusive.
It's a very select group. I like it. I like it.
But welcome to Hammock Hotel. What do you think?
You know, I like the space. I really wish I had a space for this because it's not only for filming this kind of thing, but it's kind of like your own personal gear closet too, which I'm really jealous of because I have a ton of crap and it's all smashed into a space about this big in my apartment.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about planning a trip. I love planning trips. Do you like planning trips?
To a point. I like knowing all the details of a trip, but researching the details is a little daunting. That's why going on a trip with someone like this really helps with that, with that part of it. So,
I mean, I like planning because it's kind of like going on the trip from home, where you get your map, your data book, looking on YouTube, all those different places, and you're kind of imagining your trip before you go. So this video is going to be all about planning your backpacking trip, but what this video isn't going to be is how to go backpacking. That isn't what this video is about. It isn't about how to camp, how to hike, how to walk, what gear should I buy. Are you sure we can have a video without you talking about gear?
I have a lot of gear because gear makes you a better hiker, right? So.
Okay. The first thing we need to talk about is how do you decide where to go?
For me, it's depending if it's going to be a longer or shorter trip. There are tons and tons of trails, whether they're local or nationally or even internationally. That's all personal preference. Is there something on your bucket list? Is there something that you saw someone else do that you wanted to do? It's all a matter of personal preference.
So, I mean, there's a ton of trails out there. I mean, I start watching YouTube. You just Google it, Backpacker Magazine, all these different places. Go on the various social media sites, Facebook groups, that sort of thing, and it just gives you a ton of data. And then you kind of find one that interests you, at least I do. And then I go out and, I go on the internet and I buy a map. And some trails have better guides than others, but the guidebooks are great. Even though, it's a big book like this, I've probably read 10% of that, but it's some good information. You definitely don't want to bring that in your backpack.
If you are going to need specific things like this, you can make photocopies of this, laminate it, and bring it with you. Some people who trail hike or who thru hike this trail, they'll take this book with them, and as they complete a section, they'll literally just tear out the pages and use them as a campfire. And then by the time that their trail is over, all you have is a cover.
Makes it a little lighter towards the end.
It does, but that's pretty ambitious. But there's a lot of things that are available on the internet now, whether it's an app like Guthooks.
For people who don't know what Guthooks is, can you explain it to them?
Guthooks is an app, and you can buy different sections, different trails, the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Coast Trail, a lot of the bigger trails, even international. And it'll actually track you to where you are on the trail. It'll give you updates on water sources, any weather updates, anything that other hikers have reported on that app. It'll give you an update as you're coming into that section. So it's a very good resource to get up-to-date information on the trail section that you're on.
So I actually used Guthooks when I was on the Colorado Trail.
Yeah, they have it, yep.
And it was sweet because, it actually tell you what altitude you're at. It kind of give you your mileage, just like if you're on a treadmill, like, okay, you've walked 3.8 miles. And the bad part about Guthooks is you know exactly where you're at. If you've ever run on a treadmill and you're supposed to run like 5 miles and you run for like 15 minutes and you look down and you're like, oh, I've ran a half a mile. It's the same thing there where you have to almost have some discipline to not keep looking at your phone. When you're trying to decide where to go, you also have to factor in, obviously how much time do you have off from work?
Correct.
How much is it going to cost? All sorts of things. So,
and how you're going to get there.
Exactly. Good segue. Transportation. How are you going to get to your hike? Rob and I go out on the Spear Hiking Trail a lot because it's only 4 hours away from our house.
It's our big main trail in Minnesota, fantastic trail in Minnesota.
But one of the things up there is, you know, if we're going to hike for 40 or 50 miles, we need to decide how are we going to get back to our car.
Correct.
So we need to decide, are we going to drive separate cars and one person parks on one end and we shuttle back and forth? Are we going to take the hiking shuttle service, which there are multiple options? Or are we just going to do a hike in and come back out?
Yep, or a loop trail or something like that. Those are all really good options. If you are going to take one of the shuttle services, I would suggest, whether you're on this trail or any other trail, and they're going to pick you up and drive you either to a trailhead, I would suggest that they pick you up from your car and take you to your beginning point. That way you can hike back to your car. That way your car is always waiting there. You don't have to meet a time schedule for a shuttle meeting you at the end. You're just hiking to your car. That's what I suggest.
In a lot of trails, finding the shuttle service where they aren't quite as developed as Spear Hiking Trail, it's a little bit harder to find the shuttle service. An example is Rob and I are going down the Ozark Highland Trail in just under 3 weeks. And I've taken one shuttle service a couple times, but the trail, you know, is 165 miles long. So if you're trying to do a little segment hike that's a long ways away from where that shuttle is, it doesn't work out fine. So they'll do it, but it'll cost you an arm and a leg. So I called down there and, you know, I just asked the one shuttle driver and outfitter, are there any other shuttle drivers on the other side of the trail? And he suggested a different Buffalo River outfitter. And I called them and they're like, well, for where you're going, you should call this Ron Ferguson guy. So it just takes a little bit of time, and don't try to do it 3 days before you start your hike.
Now, as far as the trail itself, that's where you're deciding if you're going to do a complete trail or just a section of a trail. So you want to do some research on which part of the trail you're going to be on. Are there points of interest? Are there campsites along the way? Water sources? So you have to analyze your part of the trail that you're going to be hiking, whether it's a section or whether it's a through hike. It's nice to know that stuff, and that's why that Gut Hooks app comes into play. But I mean, how do you typically look at that?
Well, first of all, before you get into the weeds too much, is you look at the trail and you figure out what's going to be the best spot to go hiking at. You know, where are the cool views? Where are the fewest people, if that's important to you? And you want to plan out where you're going to be spending your time in all the cool parts of the trail. So you don't want to be hanging out in the boring green tunnel and then have to rush through the best spots. I like to plan my campsites where it's close to an overlook or where there's going to be a sunset. But you talked about water earlier. That's one of the most important things when we look, and we still got to do that for Ozark Highland Trail.
Yes, we do.
Because I haven't quite figured out, am I going to carry, you know, a liter of water, or am I going to carry 2 liters of water? And why that's important is obviously you don't want to run out of water, but equally as bad is carrying too much water, because water's 2.2 pounds per liter.
Yep.
So you may be buying all this expensive equipment, and then you're carrying 3 liters of water when you don't need to.
Yeah,
and
that's over 6 pounds.
have you ever run out of water on the trail?
I have.
That's not a good thing.
No, it's not. I mean, depending on how thirsty you are, you could panic, but it's nice to know where the potential water sources are. And if you know that there's a potential dry stretch, that's when you can go ahead and camel up, knowing this by doing your research and carrying extra water for that section.
Mm-hmm. So also when you're hiking, you got to think about, you got to look at the topography, the trail conditions, what the weather's going to be like, because they're all going to affect how far you can hike comfortably in a day.
Correct.
So, quick story about this. I went out to the Pacific Crest Trail and hiked the first 25 miles all in a day. And I went on to their map here and looked at it and looked at the topography, and you know, their map just showed just a gradual up and down. I'm like, oh, it's flat. I'll just cruise through that. I should be home by 3 o'clock. Well, their topography map was in 1,000-foot increments.
That's right, not hundreds of
and
feet.
not 100-foot increments. So, needless to say, I was a little tired by the end of that
Yeah,
one.
elevation profiles are very, very important, especially to me. I'm a decently paced hiker. I do slow down on the uphills. That's just how I am. Short legs.
Everybody does.
Yeah, I know. Short legs. So elevation, if I know something's going to be pretty challenging elevation wise, I prepare myself more than anything mentally for it. I know I can do it. I just got to convince my brain that I can do it. And then of course, all the more up and downs you do, the more water you're going to consume too.
But one of the other things you should look at is trail conditions, and you're not going to be able to figure out what the trail conditions are, the up-to-date trail conditions are, in a book. Go on their website, the association websites, or the Facebook groups. And if it's been raining for the last 3 weeks, or it's May on the Superior Hiking Trail, it's going to be muddy and you're going to be doing tight ropes, or if there are a lot of tree falls, it's going to slow you down and you need to scale back your mileage.
Right. Any information you can gather on the current trail conditions. Facebook has been a great resource for that. So many of these trails have a local Facebook page, and if you just find them, people are posting trail updates all the time. I know Superior Hiking Trail, everyone is always asking about trail updates, not only for mud and stuff like that, water, but bugs. People ask, there's bug reports, because up in Minnesota, our state bird is not the loon, it's the mosquito. So it's always good to scour Facebook to try to find a local trail conditions page for your trail.
Another important factor when planning your backpacking trip is looking at the campsites. I mean, is it a trail where you can camp anywhere? Is it a trail that has designated campsites? Is it a trail where you actually have to reserve a campsite in advance? And also when looking at the campsites, are you with a big group of people? Are you all going to fit in that campsite? Are there 25 people in hammocks? Are there trees at the campsite? Just some things to figure out. Of course, if you're hiking solo in a tent, it makes it a little bit easier as long as you're camping in the right spot.
Right. And the other thing about campsites is we do some group hikes every once in a while, and we try to limit it to probably 6 people. When you get to big groups, it's not only hard for camp space, but it's also hard on the actual campsite itself. There's a lot more activity, a lot more. It just wears on the campsite a little bit more. Plus, if someone just hiked 25 miles and they come into camp and there's 13 people there, you have nowhere to stay. That's the worst feeling in the world. But those are all things that you can look up if there's sites that have information on each individual campsites. How many tent pads there are, how many people are allowed to be at the campsite. There's all these things that should be available on the website of your trail. Should be.
Okay, let's transition into emergency conditions. So you always have to plan for if your hike doesn't go well. And the first thing that I'd like to figure out is if I have to bail out anywhere along the trail, where can I do that? So, we're planning this 80-mile hike on Ozark Highlands Trail, and on my map I've pointed out the 5 trailheads that go in between point A and point B, and there isn't a town there, but it's a place where you can bail out.
Where a vehicle could access you. Worst case scenario, an ambulance can get to you. If you're in the middle of one of these sections and people have to come down trail to get you, that's that's a little bit more challenging. But knowing where your trailheads are, where they intersect actual main roads, is going to make a huge difference, so people can just access you.
Even if it isn't a real emergency, but say Rob twists his ankle, he feels fine, but he doesn't want to hike anymore. He can set up camp at a campsite near that spot. I can come back, and get him at the end of the hike.
Correct. And that also, as far as the emergencies go, you can never plan for every emergency. You can carry some basic things, but the big thing that you should probably get, especially if you're going to be solo backpacking, would be one of these Garmin InReach devices like this. There's a bailout button on these things. You can just push them and emergency services will come and find you. Not only that, devices like that can send signals and track you along your route so your family and friends can follow you. Just to make sure, that's just another way for someone to find you specifically within a few meters of where you actually are if you become immobile or incapacitated. So
I always plan as if my cell phone isn't going to work. If it does work, that's awesome, but I don't rely on it. And if you have a spouse at home or family at home that are expecting you to call and check in, and your phone doesn't work out on the trail and you don't call and check in, they freak out.
They do.
I've seen all these Facebook posts for Colorado Trail where it's a mom on there worrying about her son that hasn't checked in 3 days. It's like, well, he's probably okay. He just can't check in. So don't plan on having a phone work out there. One thing that I always like to do, just in case I do have phone service, is before I go on my trip, figure out where the nearest hospital is, and get that into my phone. 911 may work, but it's always nice to know, if you break your arm and somebody picks you up, where should they take you?
Right. One thing that is key, just to let people know where you are, leave your travel plans with your family at home, with a friend at home, and even in your car. So if they can find your car, at least they can figure out that you were there. If they have to break into your car, there's at least some instructions there too. So just leave your travel itinerary with someone at home. One of the big things that I struggle with a little bit, especially on longer sections, if you're going to do 50 plus miles, is resupplying, whether it's food or gear, because you're not going to carry 10, 12 days worth of food, or maybe you're going to need an extra pair of shoes if you've already done 500 miles, something like that. But resupply points. I've had a tough time finding resupply points, like on the Superior Hiking Trail. They don't have very good options. There are places, but you have to go further to get them. He's done a little bit more on some of the resupply stuff.
Yeah, so I'm really good at putting together resupply packages and mailing them to places. But maybe you should know before we go on this trip, I've had 3 trips planned with resupplies, and all 3 of them, something went wrong on the trip, and I never actually made it to my resupply box.
All right, that's good to know.
So, this trip's a little bit shorter. We only have to go, 30, 40 miles to our resupply, so I would hope I can make it that far.
I hope so.
But all of those trips, what was nice is my resupply, I mailed to a post office where you just mail it to general delivery, right on there. I'm a Ozark Highland Trail hiker. My name is Jeremy or Rob or whatever, and Holt. And you go to the post office, pick it up, and you're good. But if you don't make it there, they sit on that package for 30 days, and then they don't want it at the post office, so they have to mail it back to you. And then you can grab your mountain houses out of there and use it for a different trip.
And it works. But there's other places than a post office that you can use for resupplies. There's outfitters. There's general stores, depending on where you are.
Community centers. That sort of thing. The other option that you have is if you aren't going to mail your food ahead, find a little town that may be along the trail with a grocery store, and you can go in and buy your Spam there.
Yeah, if you know you're going to go through a town, the Dollar General, I believe, is a spot where a lot of people just resupply there. They don't have anything dropped off. They just resupply as they go. But if none of that is available and you're going to go through a couple of different trailheads, there's one more thing you could do. You can actually secretly cache some food.
Yeah. Just make sure you put it in something that the animals aren't going to eat before you get there, because there's nothing worse than hiking 40 miles and you're starving and you get to your food and it's not there.
It's full of mice or whatever.
But not only caching, but you don't have to mail your resupplies. It just takes more time. You can go drop it off at that outfitter or someplace business and pick it up later as well.
Yeah, if it's along the way, sure. If it's not, in our case for the Ozark Highlands, it's not. We're going to have to mail this one ahead.
Do you prefer to group hike or solo hike?
There's pluses and minuses for both. I know whenever we tend to do a group hike, everyone thinks a group hike is you're always hiking together. That rarely stays like that. You always start together, but throughout the course of the day, you start separating, and then now you're hiking your own hike at that point. I actually like that because no one can actually see me struggle, which is kind of nice. But it's also nice to have the camaraderie and the joking around and giving each other crap and all that kind of stuff. So that's nice as well. But there's camp time for all that. So As far as actual trips go, I like going with other people just, for the entertainment and the different experiences. But the actual hike itself, I actually like hiking by myself. Is that weird?
No, that's why we're good hiking buddies, because
we separate all the time.
We like to camp together, but actually last year on the Ozark Highland Trail, Rob woke up 2 hours before me one day and started hiking.
Yep.
And he was a little bit slower than me on that trip, so I woke up in the morning and I was like, hell yeah, let's go.
Yep. And I did some night hiking right in the morning. I have that trip video. You can see that right up here. I was hauling ass in that morning. It was cool. I felt awesome. And Jeremy ended up catching up to me. We were just a couple of miles, from the end, and that was really nice. I didn't have the pressure to try to keep up with Jeremy because he's this tall, lanky guy with big strides, and I'm this little hobbit dude that's just trying to truck along. But I get it done.
Yeah. So some of the benefits, obviously, with going in a group is if you do fall and break your leg, there are other people there to help. But it's also a lot more difficult logistically.
Yes, it is.
Where you have people who hike at different speeds. You have people that may not show up on time. Just waiting and figuring out the cars, and it's a little bit. And solo backpacking, I love because a lot of times I'll say, you know what, I'm going to go backpacking this weekend. On Thursday night, pack up my pack, hop in my car the next day, don't have to talk to anybody. I can walk as fast as I want, as slow as I want. I can stop and shoot video along the trail and not worry about holding people up. But that being said, at the end of that hike, I'm thinking, boy, some company would have been nice.
Yeah. Well, another benefit of hiking with a group is if you forget something. I forgot my stove. Chances are someone else has a stove. Oh, I didn't bring enough food. Chances are someone overpacked food. Guaranteed. When you're planning a group hike, and when I say group, it's with one or more people. Like 2 of us, we're considered, a group hiking. And you have to know who you're hiking with, and you have to be okay with who you're hiking with. We could be the best friends in the world, but on trail it's a little bit different. He hikes faster, I hike a little slower. Is that okay? You have to know the expectations of your hiking partner. And either way.
In that situation, would he expect me to stay with him, or is he okay with me ditching him and waiting for him at the campsite?
Me personally, I would rather you hike your own hike. It's actually harder to hike faster to keep up with someone, but it's also harder to hike slower to keep up with someone. If you hike at your own pace, just like running, your own pace is going to be most optimal for you. For me, I would rather you hike your own hike. I'll see you at camp. I know where I'm going. You know where you're going. And if I don't get there, you might want to come looking for me. Or vice versa. If I get to camp and you're not there.
So, there's other things to talk about, but just talk about, even though you think you know somebody well, what their expectations are as far as, when we get to camp, are you okay with me laying in my hammock and napping the whole time? Or do you expect me to go out and gather firewood and talk to you the whole time?
Camp chores are a definite thing. When I get to camp, I'm very, very task-driven. I like to get my hammock up. If we're going to have a fire, I like to get all that stuff done. I actually have a little hard time just kind of relaxing around camp. For me, I'm always have to do something. I think that's the backcountry bushcrafter in me. I'm always thinking of tasks.
Yeah, Rob, go build that campfire.
Seriously,
wake me up when it's going.
Yeah, and I would do it too. But the times where I do actually say, okay, sit down, relax, chill, it's kind of nice. It is kind of nice. But know what to expect from your partner. Are they the kind of person that really doesn't do much? Are they very, very on task? Are they okay with you hiking without them? Find out all these things up front. It's not personal. It's just better to know all that stuff up front rather than having to deal with it at that time, because then there can be some tensions, and now you're hiking the next 50 miles with that. So.
Yeah, and when you're in that environment where it may not be an optimal environment, where it's hot or raining and you're lugging up this big hill and you've been around this guy for 4 days and there's that one little thing that annoys you and you're just, got to keep my mouth shut.
Yep.
So
one more thing and I'm going to lose my shit.
That's not the first time I've heard that.
So, maybe go on a couple of day hikes first before you do a 100-mile trail. That'd be good.
One final thing I wanted to talk about is not only at the campsite, but traveling with someone, trying to decide if you're driving a long ways, whose car are you taking? Is that person driving the whole time? Are you splitting time? Who's paying for things like gas, hotel, food,
Permits, reservations.
That's true. So just be considerate, be a good person, and be generous. You know, if the other guy's driving, pay for his gas. You know, help him out in any financial way that you can. So, is there anything that we missed talking about planning for a backpacking trip?
Well, just to hit on the travel and costs, for me, if someone's driving, the other person has a couple of responsibilities. One, they pay for fuel. Two, they're the navigator. And three, if the driver's getting tired, then it's the passenger's job to keep that driver engaged. Or you're switching. You know, don't just nod off the whole time and good luck. You know what I mean? You're in it together from the drive out there through the trip and through the drive home. So talk about how you're going to split costs and those logistics. Get those out of the way up front so you know exactly what to expect. Now, is there anything else that we need to touch on for just overall planning for a trip, a backpacking trip?
Always expect the unexpected. Something's going to happen, and I think that's what makes backpacking trips fun, is the unexpected.
You can have all the detailed plans you want. You can have everything marked, and you can have your mileage planned down to the T. However, Murphy's Law will come down and change something on you. And some people aren't okay with change. They get a little, anxious about it. Go with the flow. If change happens, adapt and keep rolling. That's part of the experience. As long as you get to the end, you'll be fine. Take it all as it comes, because it's all the experience, and that's why you're out there.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for coming to the Hammock Hotel.
Yes, I dig it, man. This is a good topic, and I think not a lot of people talk about it, and they should. They really should. We're planning this Ozark Highlands trip, and it's going to be a longer trip, and there's a lot of logistics involved, and it's going to be our first big backpacking trip of the season, so I'm really excited about it. Jeremy's done 95% of the planning. The 5% I did was just asking him what he's doing. That's
okay. That's the way I like it. So, next Tuesday I'm going to have a video on what's going to be in my pack for that trip.
Yep, I'll have that as well.
And speaking of our channels, I'll put a couple links down here for our channels and how you can get to them. Subscribe and hit the notification bell. And hey, we'll see you out in a couple weeks on our hike. See you on the trail.